You're doing everything they told you. Low fat, whole grains, fruit for breakfast. And somehow, you feel more tired than ever. This video promises to expose the one thing you've never been told that could reverse your fatigue, pain, and weakness after 70. You'll meet someone just like you, who went from barely walking to thriving, all by doing the exact opposite of what experts recommend. What if the foods you think are saving you are the very ones slowing you down? Before we start, tell us where you're watching or listening from. If you find this helpful, hit the subscribe button, because tomorrow we have new special tips for you. Margaret was 76 years old, and her hands had held more than most. They had held babies, heavy grocery bags, garden tools, cleaning rags, and a husband's worn fingers when life got hard. For over 50 years, she had taken care of others, her children, her grandchildren, her husband when he got sick, even neighbors who needed a little help. She had always been the strong one, the one people leaned on. But now, her own strength was quietly slipping away. Getting out of bed in the morning took longer. Her knees hurt like rusted hinges, and her back felt like it carried a mountain. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a face that had smiled a lot, cried in secret, and slowly grown more tired with time. Her heart still wanted to dance, but her feet just couldn't keep up. She didn't complain much, because older folks are taught to be tough. She'd say it's just part of getting old, even when her bones ached so badly that she needed to hold onto the walls when walking to the bathroom at night. Every morning, she'd open the cupboard and swallow more pills than she could count. Some were for her blood pressure, some for her joints, others for her stomach, which always seemed upset. She kept telling herself that this was normal. After all, what else could a 76-year-old expect? But deep inside, a little voice whispered, there has to be more than this. Margaret had given her life to caring. She was proud of it, but she never really had time to care for herself. Her meals were often quick, toast with jam, crackers with cheese, or a banana and some tea. Easy things, light things. She didn't have the appetite for much more. Doctors always told her to eat lots of fiber, more fruits, more grains. So she did, but the more she followed their advice, the more tired she felt. Her stomach would bloat. She'd get cramps. She even stopped going on walks with her neighbor, Helen, because her energy was gone before the front gate. Her family noticed, but they didn't know what to say. Her son would visit on Sundays and bring her blueberries and low-fat yogurt, thinking it was healthy. She'd smile and thank him, but inside she felt worse each week. Her grandson once asked if she wanted to play a board game, and she said no, too tired. That night, she cried a little. She wasn't sad about missing the game. She was scared that she was slowly disappearing from her own life. She missed feeling alive. She missed laughter that didn't hurt her ribs. She missed walking barefoot in the garden without needing to sit down every few minutes. Even little things like opening a pickle jar had become a chore. Sometimes she would stare out the window and think, is this how the rest of my life will be? Just waiting to get older, waiting to get weaker. But she never said those words out loud. Older people are used to holding things in. So she kept folding laundry. She kept boiling potatoes. She kept pretending that feeling this way was okay. But it wasn't. Deep inside, she felt like her body was trying to tell her something. Not in words, but in quiet whispers. Whispers of pain, stiffness, exhaustion, and sadness. It was like her body was waving a white flag, begging her to listen. At night, when the house was quiet and the TV flickered softly, she would touch her legs and wonder why they felt so heavy. She'd rub her shoulders and think about how they used to carry babies, not just pain. And she'd wish someone would tell her what to do. Someone who truly understood how it felt to be older, tired, and invisible in a world that keeps moving faster. Margaret didn't want to run marathons. She didn't want to climb mountains. She just wanted to feel strong again, even just a little. She wanted to wake up without dread, to laugh without pain, to walk to the garden and back without needing to rest. She didn't need miracles. She needed something real, something that could bring her back to life, even if just a little at a time. She didn't know it yet, but her journey was about to take a very strange and unexpected turn. The morning started like most others. The sun peeked through the curtains, birds chirped softly outside, and the smell of old wood and warm tea filled the house. Margaret sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her slippers. They looked so far away. Just bending over to grab them made her head feel dizzy and her lower back pulse with pain. She waited a moment, steadying herself. Her hands, once strong enough to lift toddlers and tug heavy laundry baskets, now trembled just from gripping the side of the mattress. She whispered to herself, "Come on, girl," and slowly stood up. Her knees cracked like dry branches. Her feet tingled as if stepping on tiny pins. Still, she shuffled toward the kitchen, one hand trailing the wall for support. The kettle hissed as it boiled, and she poured herself some tea. Her favorite mug had flowers on it, now faded from years of use. She added a splash of milk and sat down to rest before breakfast. A small envelope on the counter caught her eye. It was a bill, nothing too important, but it needed to be mailed. The mailbox wasn't far, just down the driveway, across the front yard. A 10-minute task at most. Or at least, it used to be. She sighed. Just thinking about the walk made her tired. But she felt silly asking her son to do it. "I can do this," she said, more to convince herself than anyone else. She slipped on her old brown shoes, the ones with the stretchy laces, because bending down to tie knots was too painful now. She put on her cardigan and held the envelope tight in her hand, like it was her mission. As she opened the front door, the cool breeze touched her face, and for a second, she felt like her old self again. But the second she took her first step, reality returned. Her knees buckled slightly. Her breathing grew heavy. The ground felt uneven, even though it wasn't. Each step felt like lifting a heavy bag of stones. Halfway down the driveway, her heart began to race. Her chest felt tight, and she reached out to the mailbox post to steady herself. She paused, rested. Her legs shook underneath her. Her hands gripped the envelope, now slightly crumpled. She wanted to cry, but she wouldn't let herself. She took a deep breath and continued, one slow step at a time. When she finally reached the mailbox, she opened it with trembling fingers and placed the envelope inside. She stood there, breathing hard like she just climbed a steep hill. Her back ached. Her shoulders burned. And the worst part, she didn't know if she had the strength to walk back. It was a terrifying feeling. Not the pain, not the tiredness, but the realization that something very basic had become so hard. This wasn't just a bad day. This was her life now. And it scared her. The walk back felt longer than the walk out. She had to stop twice, pretending to look at the flowers just so she could catch her breath. By the time she reached the door, her cheeks were pale and her body felt like it would melt into the floor. She collapsed on her couch, tears rolling down quietly. No one saw, no one knew, but inside, Margaret felt broken. She stayed on that couch for hours, staring at nothing. Her body throbbed. Her mind wandered. She remembered when she used to carry 2 bags of groceries uphill. She remembered dancing in the kitchen, lifting her grandkids into her lap, cleaning the windows all in one day. And now, just walking to the mailbox had drained every last bit of energy she had. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't giving up. Her body just wasn't working like it used to, and she had no idea how to fix it. That night, she sat in bed and whispered, "Is this it? Is this how it ends?" Not in some dramatic way, just a slow fading, a quiet vanishing. It was a question, a fear, and a plea all wrapped in one. She didn't expect an answer, but deep inside, something was changing. A little fire was still burning. Faint, yes, but not gone. Margaret didn't know it yet, but the answer she had been longing for was about to come from a most unexpected place, meat. It started with a cup of tea and a conversation that almost didn't happen. Margaret was sitting on a park bench near her house, wrapped in a light scarf and watching the birds flutter in the bushes. She didn't get out much anymore, but that day the sun was warm and the silence inside her house had grown too loud. She sat alone until someone slowly shuffled over and sat beside her, a woman with short gray hair and a cane with stickers on it. Her name was Ruth, and she smiled like someone who knew pain but had learned how to live with it anyway. They chatted softly, the way older people do when they recognize the same aches in one another's eyes. Margaret said her joints hurt and that walking felt impossible lately. Ruth nodded with understanding, and then said something Margaret didn't expect. "I used to feel that way too, until I started eating only meat." Margaret blinked. "Only meat?" she asked. Ruth laughed gently. "I know it sounds strange, but I was just like you. I followed every bit of advice, low-fat this, whole grain that. Still got worse. But when I changed what I ate, everything changed." Margaret raised an eyebrow. She had heard of low-carb diets. She had heard of vegetarians. But eating nothing but meat? That sounded dangerous, even wrong. "Isn't that bad for your heart?" she asked. Ruth shook her head slowly and said, "That's what I thought too. But I read more. I listened to doctors who think differently. I tried it, and now I can walk again without pain. My hands don't swell. My brain feels clear." Margaret didn't know what to think. The idea felt wild. Meat? Just meat? No apples? No toast? No salad? But there was something in Ruth's eyes that Margaret hadn't seen in a long time. Sparkle. Not the kind from youth, but the kind that says, "I came back from something dark." They sat there for a while, talking more. Ruth explained that the carnivore diet was simple: meat, salt, water. No sugar, no grains, no processed foods, just what the human body was made to eat. Margaret thought it sounded too simple, too strange. But Ruth didn't try to convince her. She just shared her story, then said, "If you're curious, just look it up. Start small. It saved my life." That night, Margaret went home, opened her old laptop, and typed carnivore diet into the search bar. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few crazy blogs or angry people arguing about bacon. But instead, she found videos of older men and women who looked just like her. People who had struggled for years, people who had tried everything, and then found healing through meat. One man had reversed his arthritis. One woman had gotten off 6 different medications. Another had energy at 80 that she never had at 60. They weren't salespeople. They weren't perfect, but they were real. And that's what mattered most. Margaret watched video after video. Some were by doctors, calm, respectful voices explaining how meat helped reduce inflammation, how animal fat gave energy, how cutting out sugar and fiber helped the gut rest and repair. It all sounded so different from what she'd heard all her life. But it also made a strange kind of sense. Humans had eaten meat for thousands of years. Only in recent decades had people started getting sicker despite all the new diets and medicines. What if the answers weren't in more pills, but in going back to what we were meant to eat? Still, fear crept in. What if it made her worse? What would her doctor say? Would her family think she'd lost her mind? But deeper than the fear was a feeling Margaret hadn't had in a long time. Hope. A little whisper that said, what if this is the thing that helps? She remembered Ruth's cane with the stickers, the way she walked, slow but proud. And Margaret thought, if she can do it, maybe I can try too. She didn't throw away her pantry overnight. She didn't turn into a steak chewing machine right away. She just started small. One morning, she skipped the toast and fruit and made 3 eggs with butter instead. For lunch, she grilled a piece of beef with salt. It felt wrong. It felt strange, but also felt peaceful. Her stomach didn't bloat. Her energy didn't crash. That evening, she skipped the crackers and ate 2 slices of lamb she had left in the freezer. She went to bed feeling lighter, not in her body, but in her spirit. Something had begun. The next day, she did it again. And the next. She didn't tell anyone yet. It was her little secret, a quiet experiment. But as days passed, something started to happen. The swelling in her hands was less. She could open jars again without wincing. Her stomach stopped aching. Her head felt less foggy. Even her sleep, which had been broken and restless, began to deepen. She still woke up stiff, but not nearly as much. She could walk a little farther, stand a little taller. She had read that the body takes time to heal. At first, it might feel odd, but she also read that animal foods carry everything the body truly needs. Protein to rebuild, fat to fuel, salt to balance. No labels, no sugar, no guessing, just nature. Margaret began writing down how she felt each day. Not numbers or medical words, just simple notes like less pain today or slept better. And slowly, those notes turned into proof. Proof that something real was happening, something she hadn't felt in years. One morning, as she looked in the mirror, she noticed a change. Her face still had wrinkles, but there was more color in her cheeks. Her eyes didn't droop quite as much. Her smile came a little quicker. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fast, but it was steady. And for the first time in a long time, Margaret felt like her body wasn't breaking down, it was waking up. She still had a long way to go. There were aches, sure. She wasn't running marathons. But now, when she walked the mailbox, she didn't need to stop halfway. She didn't sit on the couch, crying afterward. She walked, slowly and proudly, with her head held high. It was a small victory, but to her, it felt like flying. What happened next wasn't just healing, it was a comeback. Margaret didn't notice the change all at once. It was quiet and gentle, like the way spring slowly replaces winter. Each day, something small felt different. One morning, she got out of bed and didn't groan. Her knees didn't scream the way they used to. She paused for a moment, standing tall by the bed, holding on to nothing, just breathing and smiling. It was the first time in years she hadn't started her day with pain. That small moment felt like a miracle. She kept eating meat, beef, lamb, eggs, chicken with the skin on, sometimes even liver, which she never used to like. She added sea salt to everything, drank plenty of water, and kept her meals simple. No bread, no fruit, no grains, no sugar. She didn't miss them. Instead of toast in the morning, she had eggs fried in butter. For lunch, maybe a juicy steak or some ground beef with salt. Dinner was often a couple of chicken thighs or a slow-cooked roast. Her plate was always warm, comforting, and easy to chew. It filled her belly in a way that felt kind, not bloated or stuffed, but steady and strong. Within a few weeks, Margaret noticed she wasn't taking as many naps. Her energy didn't crash like it used to. Her mind felt sharper. She didn't forget her keys as often or lose her words halfway through a sentence. She could read a book without getting sleepy. Her balance improved too. She didn't need to hold on to the wall in the hallway anymore. She stood straighter, walked with more purpose, and even caught herself humming while folding laundry. One afternoon, while sweeping her porch, she realized something odd. She wasn't in pain. Not just less pain, but no pain at all in that moment. Her hands, her back, even her stiff ankles silent. She leaned on the broom and smiled at the sky. It felt like her body had been hiding behind fog for years, and now the sun was finally shining through. Her skin, once dry and pale, started to look softer and fuller. Her nails grew stronger. Her eyes clearer. Even her hair seemed to have more shine. She stopped needing her stomach pills. The bloating was gone. No more rushing to the bathroom or holding her gut in discomfort. She stopped waking up every 2 hours a night. Now, she could sleep 6, even 7 hours in a row. Deep sleep, healing sleep, the kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket and says, "You're safe now." Her dreams came back, too. Soft, colorful ones, full of faces she missed and memories from long ago. Her family noticed the difference first in her smile. "You look well," her son said one Sunday. "What's your secret?" Margaret just shrugged and said, "I'm eating differently." She didn't go into the full story. Not yet. But when her grandson asked if she wanted to play a board game, she said yes, and meant it. They played for hours, and she didn't get tired or sore. She laughed so hard, she had to wipe her eyes. That night, she felt like she was glowing. Margaret began taking longer walks. She visited the park bench where she met Ruth and hoped to see her again. She didn't need a cane, didn't need to pause every few steps. She just walked slowly, calmly, but without fear. She even dusted off her old sewing basket and started patching up clothes again, something she hadn't done in years. Her hands moved smoothly. Her fingers, once swollen and stiff, worked like they used to. It was like her body had been waiting for the right kind of fuel all along. One day, she opened her closet and found an old dress she hadn't worn in years. It was soft, blue, and made her feel pretty. She tried on, and it fit. Not tight, not loose, but just right. She twirled in front of the mirror and laughed. "Well, look at you," she whispered to herself. It wasn't about weight. It was about feeling alive again, feeling proud of the body that carried her through every hard day. Margaret started sharing her meals on a little notepad by the fridge. She tracked how she felt. No knee pain today. Slept great. Walked to the store and back. No help. The list grew. Her handwriting grew steadier, more confident. She called her doctor and asked for fewer pills. He was surprised but pleased. Her blood pressure had improved. Her blood sugar was stable. "Whatever you're doing," he said, "keep doing it." The changes weren't just physical. They were emotional. She smiled more. She felt proud. She started planning her days again. Not just survive, but real plans, gardening, reading, phone calls, maybe even visiting her cousin 2 towns over. She had hope again. She looked forward to things. And that, perhaps, was the biggest healing of all. Margaret turned 80 on a sunny spring morning. And for the first time in many years, she felt excited to celebrate her birthday. Not because of cake or candles, but because she was finally proud of the woman she saw in the mirror. She no longer feared the future. She no longer felt like she was fading. At 80, Margaret wasn't trying to be young again. She was simply being well. And that, in her eyes, was far better. She had become something more powerful than just a survivor. She was living proof that it's never too late to begin again. On your screen, you see 2 new videos that I'm sure you'll find helpful. Just decide what you want to see and click.